Day 54 to 11:02 a.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. Outside the industrial area, the general and the other military officers waited impatiently. From their expressions, anyone could tell that the operation to deal with the rebels and capture the perpetrators were at a not very optimal status. Instead of securing the perpetrators, their soldiers were the ones being secured. Although many soldiers were already able to adopt the right approach towards the strange enemies, there were still those that fell victim and vanished into the shadows. Due to the impatience of the officers, they already started to supervise the communication and directly gave orders to the squads inside the industrial area. It was then that they received an unexpected report from the sniper squads. "Break! Break!" A voice shouting through the radio traffic caused it to clear. "Eagle 1 to HQ. Eagle 1 to HQ. We spotted one of the main targets leaving the management building. Target 3 with the reddish-colored robe jumped out of the building through the window on the 3rd floor. Over. This is HQ, Eagle 1. Where is the target going? Over." The one that answered this was Captain Della Rosa himself. "Please wait." There was a short pause. "The target is capable of flight and just landed on the crane. 2 more people appeared out of thin air on the crane. Please give instructions. Over." "Just stand by until further instruction is given. Over." "Yes, sir. Over and out." Hearing that, Captain Della Rosa hurriedly peeked out of the command vehicle since the tower crane could be seen even outside the industrial area. As the captain tried to get a clearer view, he saw that the other officers and soldiers around were already watching the scene where 2 of the figures on the crane started to fight. "General, the sniper team is asking for instructions about the target on the crane." Captain Della Rosa spoke to the general, which seemed to have something on his mind as he watched the scene on the crane through a pair of binoculars. To the captain's question, however, instead of answering it, the general started to speak about something else. "Della Rosa, do you remember our suspicion that Senator Estrada could not be the one who are killing the survivor teams under those pigs?" "Yes, General. Didn't they say that the only witness saw 2 people wearing robes similar to the ones the people from that organization?" "I also remember that." At this moment, Captain Della Rosa realized what the general was trying to say. Is it perhaps those 2 fighting with the target? "We have no proof, but it is very likely. Tell the sniper squads to not interfere with those on the crane right now and concentrate on aiding the ground troops." "Yes, sir." While everyone outside was gazing at the ongoing battle on the crane, a sudden horrible move was made by the enemy camp. "Storm 1 to HQ. Storm 1 to HQ. The enemies finally appeared in droves. They're too powerful. We need more people." Not only was that radio message heard. Following the message, the gunshots inside the industrial area intensified as the main enemy forces finally appeared. Asterisk 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 on the jib of the crane, Mark watched the battle between May and Flam. The 2 already had dozens of exchanges while trying not to be bothered by the beams and metal supports on the crane. Still, none of the 2 gained the advantage until now. In terms of speed and flexibility, May was superior, but in terms of battle experience and insight, it was obvious that Flam had the advantage. Even though Flam was hardly moving and was only receiving the attacks, none of the attacks May had made actually hit his body. Each attack would either be dodged or blocked with the scabbard of his sword. If not for the psychic ability Mark gave May, she would have lost in this fight already. Force Blink, that was the ability May received from the mental crystal, containing the psychic ability of Eulalia, the last princess of Arielis. Like Freed, her psychic ability was also a movement type. It was another similarity Mark found between Psypathogen and Mutagen. People related to each other was very likely to get similar abilities. Eulalia's ability, however, was just short-range teleportation, which allowed her to transport herself to a desired place within a short distance instantaneously. That was how a young girl like her that did not have much battle capability was able to last till the final battle. The ability the princess had no regard to obstacles or dimension, and she was able to move in and out of an enclosed space without any problem as long as she was able to fit in that space. The setback, however, was that she could not use it to teleport inside things, and the ability would fail if there was not enough space to fit her body at the desired location. After May received that ability, however, it evolved, and it was very likely that it was because of her physical constitution. When she activated that ability, an invisible ellipsoid energy barrier would surround the space around her body. The size and shape of the barrier would vary depending on the dimension occupied by her body. If she activated the ability while stretching her hands out, the barrier would be larger and wider, while if she used it while crouched down, the barrier would be smaller and shorter. After the barrier was erected, that was only when she would vanish from her initial position. As for what the barrier could do, bam, finally, Flam was sent flying and his back hit one of the steel beams on the crane. When May vanished and appeared behind Flam, the latter managed to read her move and preemptively counter-attacked. He charged forward to where May would appear, which made him enter the space occupied by the invisible barrier when she appeared. Anything that was not included in her movement when she appeared would all be pushed away by the barrier. There were also restrictions as to what would be pushed away, and it was those that could be moved by force. If the thing inside the barrier when she appeared was an immovable wall or someone powerful enough to withstand the push of the barrier, it would be May who would be pushed away. Unfortunately, the restriction in distance did not change at all. May could only travel up to 4 meters away from the initial point where the ability was activated. Any more than that was impossible. Still, those restrictions did not matter at all in Mark's eyes. Just being able to move instantaneously was already envying. Although he could also move fast, there was still a delay as he needed to travel the actual distance he wanted to go. His shadow mist movement was fast but not instantaneous. Tossing those thoughts aside, Mark felt proud about May's improvement when he was gone. Being able to fight like this now was amazing, since she was nothing but a powerless trapped princess when he found her. It was quite a pity though that he was not there to witness the process of her growth. TCH. I got careless. Flam voiced out as he wiped the blood at the corner of his lips. The force that pushed him away was not a joke at all. It was even more painful than blocking the bullets from the pistol May had. It felt like he was hit by a speeding truck. However, the smile on his face just got deeper as he felt the pain in his body. This is getting really fun. You're not strong physically, but that power of yours is superb. Come on, fight. Like a madman, Flam started laughing. He removed his hood, revealing the young face he had. It was a Mark had estimated. Flam's appearance was really like a high school student that had yet to graduate in his final year. However, Mark would not expect that his real age was the same as what he looked like. After removing his hood, Flam used his right hand and reached for the handle of the sword on his back. I haven't had fun like this for a long time. It would be a shame if I don't go all out. Flam then pulled out the sword from the scabbard, revealing an odd-looking blade. The blade of the sword was not shaped similarly to the shape of the scabbard. Instead, the 6-foot-long blade was shaped like a wave, which made it enough to be put into a shorter scabbard. Seeing the sword, Mark looked with interest. So, your main body is a flamberge? Mark spoke his assumption, which made the enemy look at him with surprise. You're able to see through me. Amazing, Flam replied in glee. There were very few that were able to see through his true nature, and those people were the ones worth fighting. It just meant that not only one but there was 2 people here that were strong enough to interest him. Mark on the other hand nodded in understanding. The enemy just confirmed his assumption. When this guy appeared, he already noticed the 2 consciousness he had and the sinister aura coming from that sword on his back. Although it might sound like fantasy, he could only conclude that the sword was a cursed weapon and the young man was being possessed by the sword. Still, he did not expect that the sword would be a flamberge. The flamberge was also known with the names flame-bladed sword and wave-bladed sword. It was a sword that was likely of German or Swedish descent during the 13th century. Of course, it was more popular to Mark as a sword found in a lot of role-playing games. Still, Mark could not help but find the sword in being held by the enemy odd. The wave of the blades was more prominent, causing it to be wider than normal. I'm not really fond of talking about myself, so Flam spoke and stretched his neck. Let's continue. Flam smiled. There, his demeanor changed. Mark and May could feel the energy around him burst out. Without further wait, Flam charged towards May in a speed faster than his movements before. He then waved the sword towards her neck, which made her shiver as she felt the intense killing intent. May was almost late to dodge and Mark was already about to intercept, but she still managed to activate her ability on time. As May vanished from the trajectory of the slash, it hit nothing but air, or as it appeared, however. Clang! Crang! Creak! The jib of the crane started to creak as the remaining metal supports were not able to handle the weight anymore. Flam's slash hit nothing but the energy behind the attack severed most of the beams and metal supports under the jib of the crane. Now that there was not enough strength to support the weight of the crane, it started to break. Creak. Tang. One last creak and the jib of the crane were split in half. The part where the three stood started to fall onto the ground. The three jumped off and wings sprouted from Mark's and May's back while bursts of flames kept Flam afloat. The three were safe, and seeing that his opponents were also capable of flight, Flam was even more fascinated to fight them. At the bottom of the crane, however, W-A-A-H. G-R-R-R-A-A-O-H-H-H, both human and inhuman screams echoed. As the enemies already went out to fight the soldiers up front, their battle was also intensifying. However, a lot of them were underfighting under the crane. With a large part of the jib of the crane falling from more than a dozen meters height, the buildings where it fell also collapsed. Both the collapsed buildings and the jib of crane buried a lot of soldiers and members of Ouroboros underneath. Day 54 to 11:16 a.m., Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. A huge cloud of dust enveloped a large part of the industrial area due to the fallen jib. The visibility immediately became zero for both the soldiers and the members of the organization. When the jib fell, almost all the soldiers were focused on their own battles since the enemies already came in full force. There was very little chance for them to hear the sound made by the disconnected metal supports due to the sound of gunshots and voices around them. The moment they noticed that something big was falling from above, it was already too late. It was the same for the enemies. The humans on their side also had guns while the other races were using other weapons of their choice. They were also focused on the fight as they also needed to fill in the remaining people they needed. They needed to catch the soldiers alive, but it was not easy as not all of them were insusceptible to normal bullets like the shadow people, the ethereal spirits and the werewolves. The fight below the cranes suddenly halted when everyone noticed the big shadow falling onto them. Even though it was late, all of them tried to run away as fast as possible. Since most of the soldiers were just normal trained humans, a lot of them were not able to avoid the disaster. The unlucky ones made it out of the trajectory of the fall of the jib but got buried in the rubble of the collapsed buildings instead. There were lucky ones, but the numbers were too little compared to those that were unfortunate. As for the forces both from the Ouroboros and the Evolvers and Mutators under Senator Estrada, the number of casualties were too little compared to the soldiers. They had inhuman capabilities, enabling a lot of them to escape unscathed aside from being showered with dust. As for their casualties, it was because there was not much camaraderie between these races. If there was, the Shadow People had the capability to save them, but they did not. Mid-air, Mark and May looked at the scene below. Even Flam, who was keeping himself afloat despite being unstable, also stopped to see the result of his actions. Aside from the three, Emihan, who was hiding inside May's robe, could not help but peek outside. *T. Dop's gonna scold me later. Flam seemed to have realized that what he had just done would affect their plans severely. Not only was that, but his actions resulted to their subordinates and targets dying. While Flam was having a dilemma, Mark was scratching his head. This was going overboard. The military's goal was not only capturing Senator Estrada and fighting the forces of Ouroboros, the most important thing to them was to regain the industrial area intact as much as possible. If they could destroy this place, they might as well use explosives and not put themselves in danger to confront the enemies. Unable to maintain flight, Flam landed on one of the taller buildings that were yet to be finished in order to avoid the cloud of dust below. Mark and May, however, could still maintain flight unlike their opponent. Flam could not help but look at the two with envy. "Hey you two, are you vampires?" Flam shouted to ask, but of course, Mark and May had no plans to answer to his disappointment. As the fight was still not finished, May was about to charge once more when her shoulder was held to stop her. She could only turn to Mark, who was shaking his head. "Mayor, you can stop now." Hearing that, she tried to hide it, but Mark sensed that she was dejected. Mark could only pat her head with a smile. "Don't worry. I'm not stopping you because you can't beat him. Between your fight, no one gained advantage at all. It's hard to say who will win between you two, but your chances isn't low either. But we need to end this faster or this place will get destroyed because of that guy." "Okay." May finally felt at ease. Mark acknowledged her current abilities and that was enough for her. She smiled sweetly and retreated. "Ew. You two should get a room. Are you the one fighting me now? You shouldn't think that I can't hear what you just said. She can't defeat me. I'm not even serious yet." To that mock, however, Mark only smiled. "You don't need to get serious. You won't be able to." Without waiting for a reply, Mark vanished from his position in a puff of black mist. As his opponent vanished like the female before, Flam readied himself to intercept. He noticed the trajectory the waving mist was moving towards. As he did not know what that mist was, he just assumed that it could either be the trail his opponent was leaving behind or an attack he needed to avoid. Flam immediately slashed the mist as it moved in front of him. That slash, however, caused a burst of black smoke that tried to envelop him. He could not fathom what this smoke was, but he was feeling danger from it. With that, he waved his hand, causing a burst of flames to burn and to scatter the smoke. The oxygen in the air combusted by his will, but to his surprise, the flames was too small to even light a bonfire. It did not even need to touch the smoke before the flames vanished. Without any choice, he tried to jump back and fly by combusting the air under his feet, but before he was able to, he felt a deep sense of danger behind him. Flam was too focused on the black smoke that he was not able to follow the trail of black mist that changed direction and circled towards his back the instant the smoke burst out. Quick enough, Flam reacted. He turned his body to intercept Mark's attack from behind and jumped while creating a burst of flames under his feet to escape the smoke. That was when, "What?" Flam exclaimed as the combustion beneath his feet he expected never appeared. Instead, he saw clumps of black smoke around his feet that seemed to suck the energy that should have ignited the air. From his jump, he fell back down and missed to intercept Mark's attack. At that circumstance, Flam could only try to block whatever kind of attack was coming. To his surprise, even though he felt the animosity and thick killing intent, no fatal attack came, and instead, a hand grabbed his wrist that held the sword. Then, a painful sensation was felt from his wrist as it stopped moving. He tried to move his wrist only to feel more pain, as if his blood vessels were being torn open. "All right, got you." Flam heard his opponent's voice as he lost grip of the sword. Mark then fully materialized in front of him and took the flamberge from his hand. At that moment, Flam lost consciousness and fell on the spot. As the guy lost consciousness in the air after his jump, his immediately fell. Mark hurriedly caught the unconscious body and moved it on the roof of another warehouse. Laying down the unconscious body, Mark finally confirmed his assumption. "As I thought, once this sword is taken away from the possessed body, the connection will stop." Mark looked at the unconscious Flam. Right now, he could only detect a single consciousness inside his body, and it was the one that was deeply asleep. May also landed on the roof, seeing that the fight was over. She was looking at Mark with amazement and joy. She was having a hard time fighting Flam, but he took the enemy out in seconds. However, she noticed something. "Gerger, your arm." She noticed that the hand that was holding the sword was shaking intensely. "It's nothing. This guy here is trying to possess me." Mark pointed at the sword. "I already expected this, so I'll deal with it in a minute. I can't let go of this right now, so guard me for a bit." "Yes. No problem." May nodded and Mark sat down in a comfortable position. Swoosh. As another consciousness tried to invade his body, he was able to enter his world once more. When he entered, he expected the spiritual body of the sword to attack him, however. Mark was surprised. Instead of a formless spirit or apparition, he saw a little boy about 5 or 6 years old. Hey! What is this sh*t? I'm supposed to take over your body already, so why am I in this place? Hearing a young boy curse like this was not new to Mark, but it was still annoying to hear. You should shut up. Sad to say, you're mine now and I will be the one controlling you, not the other way around. Impossible. I am amazed that a human like you had something like this blank space in your consciousness, but you think that you can control me? Who said that it is just a blank space? Mark smiled sinisterly and snapped his finger. To the kid's horror, the surroundings changed. The blank space turned into a mountain covered in snow, and there was even a strong blizzard. The boy immediately shivered as his body started to freeze. Why you? WW had is this? On contrary, Mark stood normally as if he was not feeling the cold weather. You tried to enter my consciousness and you don't know what this is? You seem to be as strong as that deity whatever, but you lack knowledge at all. You're just a muscle brain, aren't you? You don't look like you have muscles though. Mark stared at the boy, who was not even able to reply anymore as his body was shivering fiercely from the cold. As I said, you are mine now, so just behave. Do you submit? Hearing that, the boy glared at Mark. It seemed that it was not enough. With a snap of Mark's finger, a thin streak of electricity shot towards the kid, causing his body to convulse fiercely. What's your answer now? Mark asked after he literally tortured the kid with a continuous bolt of electricity under the freezing temperature. As he finally sensed that his will to fight was broken, Mark stopped everything. I will. You will what? I will submit. And how can I be sure about that? Damn it. You're my master now. I submit. I surrender. F***ck. The kid started to throw a tantrum. If you really feel that way, then return to your body. Also stop cursing or I'll strike you with lightning or cook you inside a large pot with boiling water. Hearing those threats, the kid became wide-eyed and shivered. He immediately vanished from Mark's consciousness as if trying to run away. Seeing that he was left alone inside his space, Mark closed his eyes. When Mark opened his eyes once more, he was back in reality. May was in front of him, being on the lookout with a serious face. Even Amihan was outside already and joined May to guard him. Mark asked as he waved the flamberge in his hand. The sword already stopped resisting, and rather than a fierce aura, it was exuding a sad and helpless one. Gerger, are you fine? Yep, no problems. Anything happened? The two guys around the senator saw that you defeated this guy, so they were on the move already. I see. This makes things easier if they come to us on their own. Mark and May were already preparing to act if the two men that was left made their moves when Mark froze. Not only Mark, but almost every single member of Ouroboros that had bodies made of energy or those sensitive to paranormal energies also froze. It included Devon, who was on the way out with Dop. SWWOOSHHHH. A beam of light pierced towards the sky. The beam was as bright as the sun, causing everyone's eyes to dim for a bit. Mayor, Amihan, let's go. Mark was starting to feel infuriated. If these bastards harmed any of my people, I'll eradicate them all here. Without looking at the current state of affairs in the industrial area, Mark, May and Amihan flew off as fast as they could. It was because that beam of light that pierced the sky came from the direction of the church where Mark left everyone. Day 54 to 11:05 a.m. Baclaran Church, Redemptorist Road, Pasay City, Metro Manila. A few minutes before, while the fight between May and Flam was ongoing, Colleen and Edsel had tense expressions on their faces as they gazed through the windows of the church. They could not see anything, but the sounds of gunshots could be heard even outside the settlement. As someone whose father and mother had ties with the military, Colleen could tell that the fight inside the settlement was rather intense. Just add a bit of explosions in the background and it could be mistaken that there was a war ongoing. Is it always like this in the settlements in the city? Back in Eastport, Many people had guns, but there was never anything like this even when the evolved sea creatures came ashore. Edsel voiced out. As a country bumpkin, he was never been in a city like this. Everything was new. Even the sounds of confrontation between the soldiers and the senator's camp was the first for him. Something like this happened before in Port of Real though? Colleen replied. At the time Mark came there, several thousand infected horde coincidentally arrived and it was like war at that time. That happened? It did. I even joined the fight, well, kind of. The two started chatting to at least relieve the tense atmosphere. It was then when the eyes of the two landed on the blood children, the three girls, the fairy and the strange infected at the center of the church that were busy doing things like there was nothing intense happening outside. Iola, Abigail and Miracle sat in a circle along with the blood children, playing with building blocks Mark found for them while Amy and Ophelia looked over the children. This way, the children could relieve their boredom and the toys really took their interest as they tried to build things based on their imagination. As for Chaflar and the Alpha, both were positioned at the opposite sides of the church. The Alpha infected was on standby while the dragon was sleeping like nothing mattered at all. You girls don't feel worried at all, your mother and father are in there fighting. Colleen could not help but ask the three girls. It might not be an appropriate question to children, but it did not really enter her childish mind that was too curious at the worst times. Her question made the three girls look at her with confused expressions. It was Miracle who answered first. Papa is strong. He can kill all the bad people there. It was followed by Abigail. Mama is also strong and Papa will always protect Mama. Nothing will happen. All the bad guys that fight Mama and Papa will get killed easily. On the other hand, Iola only stared at Colleen with a, "Don't ask what is obvious," look. The three girls' trust towards their adoptive parents was amusing. Colleen felt envious. Still, three little girls viewing death and killing as everyday thing was rather scary. The three girls was about to go back to playing when Iola, Ophelia and Amy suddenly stood in full alert. Suddenly, the atmosphere turned tense that even Edsel and Colleen became on guard. Amy, who held the stone that was supposed to be her child, encircled her tentacles around the children, wanting to protect them, while Ophelia immediately called unto the Alpha. Chaflar, who also sensed the danger, already stood beside the group in a single gallop. The dragon's sudden movement shook the whole building a bit. Hiding is useless. Come out, Ophelia shouted as she stared towards the direction of the door of the church. There, several figures emerged from the shadows as if they entered through the door, despite the fact that the door of the church was left untouched. I thought that this will be easy, but wrong, huh? Sir Dop really gave us some unusual tasks. One of the hooded figures who had the largest stature among the group spoke. Not everyone came out of the shadows individually, but some of them appeared while receiving assistance. This large-statured man was one of those, which meant that he had not ability to traverse through the shadows. Who are you people? Colleen shouted as she readied her assault rifle. As the man turned to Colleen, he was rather surprised. Aren't you Colleen Bautista? You're rather popular before. However, we have no business with a human like you and that guy beside you. He then panned his eyes at everyone, specifically at Miracle, the blood children, Amy, Ophelia, Chaflar, the Alpha, and lastly, Ophelia. The humans aside, we are here to invite all of you to come with us. But of course, we are not taking no for an answer. I won't ask you all to answer since it's already obvious. The man waved his hand forwards. Take them all. With the man's command, the hooded figures that numbered to 20 individuals scattered as they charged forward. The hooded figures had different body statures, with 7 of them having lean bodies while the others looked like normal people. However, the sum of the figures with lean bodies vanished soon after and melded into the shadows while the remaining figures charged forwards. The enemies appearing and disappearing into the shadows surprised Colleen and Edsel, but there was no time to dawdle around. Due to the sudden attack, Colleen and the others had no time to plan a counter-attack, and as such, they sure will be pushed into a defensive. The ones charging forward might be fine to some extent, but the ones that entered the shadows were kind of worrying. Colleen and Edsel started shooting the enemies. Unfortunately, Even though the bullets left holes on the robes of the enemies, the bullets just phased through the bodies of the lean-figured enemies. There was not damage at all. As for those who had normal figures, some of the bullets hit their bodies, causing them to stagger. However, they still continued to run forwards like they were not injured at all. Ting! 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 Those sounds could be heard among the footsteps as the bullets that hit their bodies were pushed out and their wounds healed in absurd speed. As the enemies closed in, Amy's tentacles swept them away. Those with lean bodies were not able to dodge as they were not really fast-moving. However, only their robes were swept away from their bodies, revealing their scary black ethereal figures. There were no distinguishable characteristics on their shadow-like bodies aside from their glowing white eyes. However, the tentacles were able to block the way of the other enemies that had no ghostly bodies. Along with the Alpha and Shaflar, they were stopped on their tracks. Shaflar could not use his long body effectively inside the church, however, it managed to compensate with breathing fire with great control while trying not to burn the church where they were staying. The shadow people ignored the tentacles, the Alpha and the dragon, as their attacks phased through their bodies and continued to charge forward. They were surely aiming to snatch the smaller-bodied children. At the same time, some shadows appeared near and figures emerged from them which were trying to grab the blood children, Aphelia and Miracle. At that moment, however, GRAAAA. Their painful voices echoed as their outstretched hands met a barrier that started to corrode their hands and arms. Those that were late to retreat even lost their arms in the process. An unlucky one had his face corroded and immediately turned into scattered smoke, leaving his robe behind. Iola's eyes darted everywhere as she tried to spot the approaching shadow people. She then activated her barrier to any attacker that approached. Unfortunately for the shadow people, Iola's corrosive barrier was made of pure psychic energy which could harm them severely upon contact. This was one thing they never considered and made them pay the price. Seeing how his subordinates were being dealt with, the man with large stature was surprised. It was already strange that there was a group living here hidden outside the settlement. Who would think that they were actually this strong and could not be underestimated? AAWWWOOO. The man could not wait anymore and howled. Following him, several of his subordinates did the same. As they did that, their bodies grew larger and bulkier. Their muscles became firmer and thick hair covered their bodies. Their faces shifted and changed shape, and fangs and sharp teeth grew out of their mouths. Their robes now looked like capes that were tied to their necks due to the size they grew. Werewolves was what these men were called. Among them, the leader had a silver-colored fur and blood-red glowing eyes which indicated that he was an alpha among these werewolves. With the transformation done, the leader finally joined the fray and charged forward. Knowing that the enemy leader was the most dangerous, Aphelia controlled the alpha to concentrate on him. It became a one-on-one fight between the two, an alpha versus an alpha. The attacks the two made caused the whole church to shake, not only because of their heavy bodies but also because of their inhuman strength. However, it was obvious that the alpha infected was having a hard time. The alpha infected was fast, but not as fast as the alpha werewolf. It was more of a tank and damage dealer than an agile fighter. It was already good that the alpha infected was able to maintain a stalemate on the enemy leader. As for the other werewolves, they gained a good advantage and managed to charge forwards. They started to ignore the bullets that were flying towards them as they did not even stagger back anymore. Unknown to them, Colleen and Edsel exchanged a signal using their eyes and changed the bullets they were using. GUAAA. GAAH. The werewolves that were too confident of themselves did not even try to dodge. When they were hit by the bullets, however, their eyes went wide and they stopped in place. They felt too much pain for every bullet that entered their bodies, and by the time they noticed, the bullet wounds were not healing but started to fester instead. The wound even started to bubble and release a suffocating and nauseating smell that choked the werewolves that had their sense of smell heightened by the transformation. The alpha werewolf finally noticed. They really underestimated these people. His eyes fell on the sylph. At least, he should get the sylph and get out of this place. Bam! The enemy leader jumped back to evade a punch of the Alpha Infected and counterattacked with his heaviest punch. The Alpha Infected was thrown backwards towards Amy, causing the two to collide and fall. An opening was finally made. The enemy leader charged forwards towards Aphelia. With her small stature, Aphelia could only retreat as she tried to call the Alpha back to its feet. Since there was not much time, even Miracle, Abigail and Iola tried to intercept the enemy leader. Unfortunately, Miracle and Abigail were blown away while Iola's barrier was not enough to stop the enemy leader before it broke. The enemy leader's fur was like steel and the barrier was barely able to corrode it. The alpha werewolf stretched his hand forwards trying to capture the sylph. Aphelia's control with flight was still bad and as such, she could not maneuver herself to dodge. She was captured. He felt a bit of relief as he caught the sylph. As his other hand was free, his eyes darted to try and get another thing. However, instead of the blood children, his eyes landed on the spherical stone that was placed on a pillow. Knowing how the stone looked strange, he hurriedly tried to grab it. Amy watched in horror as her child was about to get taken by the enemy. However, there was too little time for her to move. She pushed the alpha away from her body, causing it to collide with one of the central posts of the church and sent her tentacles to intercept the enemy leader. Still, it was not enough. Before her tentacles could reach the enemy, he would already be able to retreat with her child. "Krraaaa!" she shrieked. The eyes on her tentacles opened wide, which glared at the enemies with great killing intent. ZWWWOOM. Several beams of light swept over the enemies, which soon joined into one as her tentacles moved together towards one direction and tore the whole Baclaran church in half. Day 54 to 11:16 a.m. National Shrine of Our Mother of Perpetual Help, Baclaran Church, Redemptorist Road, Baclaran, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Light entered through the disintegrated roof of the church. The whole church was literally divided in half as the walls and the roof where the beams of light passed through formed holes and lines. Amy did not expect that to happen, and she did it by instinct due to the overflowing emotions she had. When she saw that her tentacles were boring holes everywhere in the church and not only the enemies could be hit, she forced her tentacles to fire the beams in one direction and pointed the tentacles upwards. That was the cause of the divided walls and roof of the church. She only meant to save her child and did not want to destroy the church. However, what was done was already done. The only thing she could do next was to search for everyone and her child, wrap them with her tentacles and bolt out church as fast as she could. Fortunately, she found everyone she looked for easily because of her numerous eyes. That was except for the captured Aphelia. She could not find the leader of the enemies either. She wanted to look for Aphelia, but there was no time left. Debris started to fall, causing clouds of dust and more destruction. The church would not hold out any longer. Crumble. Bam. With the walls first, the church started to turn into a pile of rubble. Amy grabbed everyone, even leaving their things inside the church, and bolted out of one of the largest holes on the wall of the church. However, her speed was slower than the speed that the church started to crumble. Because Aphelia was gone, the Alpha Infected stood on place without moving. Amy tried to take the Alpha out, but the Infected was too heavy. Without any other choice, she had to leave it. As for the other large guy, Chaflar, it already spread its wings and flew out of the roof after seeing that Amy already had everyone. Of course, since the church was already crumbling, the smart dragon did not hold back anymore. It blew a huge burst of flames, incinerating a lot of the remaining enemies that were also fleeing from the crumbling church. Amy managed to get out safely with everyone. She looked at the state of the others with relief on her face. It was fortunate that she did not shot them with those beams by mistake. Among the little girls, Iola and Miracle were fine, but Abigail seemed to have received a bruise on her right cheek and right arm after being blown away by the enemy leader. All the blood children were like the way they were before the battle. As for Colleen and Edsel, the two were also fine aside from being covered in dust. They watched the church crumble and became a pile of debris. Even they already escaped the church, they still ran away further in order not to get caught in the cloud of dust that scattered. Still, there was no sign of Aphelia or the alpha werewolf. At this time, Miracle, Iola and the blood children looked up to the sky. Papa! Mama! The two girls called out as they saw two figures flying towards them in a hurry. Mark frowned at the scene of the crumbling church. When he saw them outside the church, he sighed in relief, but his frown did not vanish. It was because he could not detect someone. Together with May, the two landed in front of the group, which were immediately greeted by the embrace of the little girls. "Is everyone all right? Where's Ophelia?" Mark asked. At his question, he saw everyone's expression change for the worse. "We don't know," Colleen replied. "We saw her got captured before the church crumbled, but we didn't see her afterwards. Even the guy that captured her is gone." "Tell me, what happened?" Hearing his question, Colleen summarized what happened while the behaved girls waited their turn to supplement other things. While listening to the story, Mark's expression started to turn calmer and calmer. Angry? Yes, he was. He was too angry that he became too calm instead. He turned to Abigail, whose right cheek and arm was reddish. It was too obvious on her skin that was like of a porcelain doll. "Did they do this?" Mark said, which the girl nodded. He patted her head as gently as possible and let out a gentle smile. "Don't worry. I'll punish them for you and take back your Aunt Aphie." Mark turned to Amy and Colleen. "Find somewhere else to hide. This place is not safe anymore." He then turned to May. "Mayor, you stay here. Treat Gail with this. Colleen know how to use this." Mark gave May a pouch he had on him which contained plastic medicine bottles containing the regeneration medicine he got from the military in Quezon province. May was also mad about what happened, especially when she looked at how badly Abigail was bruised. Aside from Mark, the only ones she cared for the most were the three girls. Seeing that they were injured and were subjected to great danger was making her feel that she could destroy a whole country. However, Mark was right. She needed to treat Abigail's injuries first. What the girls needed the most right now was the security a parent could bring them, and she was the only one that could give it to the three right now. Mark watched the group hurriedly leave the area. There were infected that were already drawn to the commotion, but with Amy and May around, they should be fine. He turned to Chaflar, was still sweeping across the air searching for any survivor of the enemies to burn alive. However, it could not see anyone else anymore. "Chaflar," Mark called out, "you will come with me. We're going on to save Ophelia, but first." Mark's eyes swept the area. It was not like there was no one anymore among the enemies left here. They were just hiding. "It's useless to hide, you bastards," he murmured as his expression became blank. Instead, his eyes glowed brightly that it could be seen clearly from a distance even though the sun was high up in the sky. "Grrrruuuaa. Gah!" Painful screams was heard as the enemies hiding in the shadows were forced out while holding their heads in extreme pain. If not for the fact that they had no physical bodies, their orifices should have already been bleeding badly. Seeing this shadow people, Mark felt like laughing. All of them looked like disabled people. Some had missing arms while others had missing legs. One of the worst-looking guys did not even have a single limb left and was only able to move by melding into the shadows. Mark approached one of the shadow people and grabbed the person by his neck. Despite the pain the shadow people felt in their heads, they were all shocked. As their bodies were non-physical, unless they wanted to, no one could touch their bodies. But now, one of them was mercilessly picked up by his neck. Then, the body of that shadow person Mark grabbed disintegrated in a way that was as painful as possible. While his body was disintegrating, the shadow person's cries could already be put as background screams in horror movies and games. As if releasing his anger, Mark smiled as the enemy on his hand suffered. This made all these remaining shadow people shiver. Even though Mark was wearing the same robe as them, there was no doubt that he was their enemy. Unfortunately, Mark had no time to do this one by one. He already had an idea where to find Ophelia and he needed to catch up. And thus, several surges of black smoke covered the bodies of the remaining shadow people. The smoke did not kill them immediately but started to eat their bodies as slowly as possible, causing an even more eerie sight. Asterisk 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 day 54 to 11:25 a.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque, Metro Manila. To think that Flam is taken. We underestimated those two. Dop frowned as he stared at the unconscious boy in front of him. This unconscious boy was left along on the ground and was retrieved by one of his men. The fight between the military and the members of Ouroboros did not reduce even after the incident with the falling jib of the tower crane. The military focused on retrieving surviving soldiers under the rubble while holding off the enemies. Unfortunately, it was different on the enemies were different. They did not even care about their comrades and focused on fighting the soldiers. Due to the circumstances, it was the military that was forced to a defensive instead of the enemies. Sir Dop, what do you mean? Isn't this Flam? Why did you say that he was taken? Devon could not help but ask. He was not of the same rank as the two and had no idea what Flam was. The missing sword is Flam's real body. This boy here is nothing but a body he used because of interest. Dop replied as he nudged the face unconscious boy with his shoe. Devon and Senator Estrada was surprised and confused. They could not fathom how that was possible. Dop on the other hand was feeling strange. Flam was a cursed sword and anyone that touched it would be possessed. And yet, the person that took him was still fine and it seemed that it was Flam who was beaten into submission. With these thoughts, urgency filled his mind. It seemed that their enemies were not just simple pests that they could deal with. While Dop was on deep thoughts, several figures appeared inside the room which emerged from the shadows. When he saw the appearance of the figures, Dop was shocked. Emmett, you. Dop was speechless as he saw Emmett's condition. He sent Emmett and his squad just to capture a sylph and her companions. It should just be an easy task since that group was just composed of a ragtag band with 3 children. However, looking at Emmett's condition despite being an alpha werewolf, he could not hide his shock anymore. Emmett's left arm was missing and by the looks of it, it was not chopped but more seemed like burned into crisp. There was no blood dripping as his wound was melted into closing. Not only his left arm but he was also missing his right foot and right ear. If not for the fact that Emmett was maintaining his werewolf form, he should have passed out already. Besides Emmett, the subordinates that returned with him were all shadow people that also lost some parts of their bodies. Sir, don't worry about my injury. Emmett weakly spoke. I completed the main goal. Emmett opened his large hand revealing the unconscious sylph he captured. Seeing the sylph, Dop was delighted. If they managed to retrieve Flam and start the last part of their mission here, it would be perfect. He tried to reach for the sylph but before he was able to do so, Emmett spoke. Sir, it's better if we leave this place. As you can see, it's only us who managed to escape and I only snatched his sylph by sacrificing a lot. That group this sylph belonged to is not your normal people. If they chased us here to retrieve her, our casualties will be even more severe. Hearing that, Dop was forced into thinking. As Emmett was his direct subordinate, Dop knew his personality. To make him suggest leaving, for sure, the situation could be grave. The preparations is about to finish. We can leave after that. Dop decided. However, before he was able to say anything further, everyone froze. They noticed that the surroundings suddenly went dark. They all hurried to gaze outside the window and there they saw. Black swirling clouds covered the sky. Sir Dop, is this part of the preparation? Devon asked in utter confusion. No, it's not. Dop answered with a serene face. No one knew how the clouds suddenly appeared but one thing they all knew. This was a bad sign. Day 54 to 11:30 a.m. South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. The light-colored clouds at the sky above the settlement gathered faster and faster fusing into dark gray clouds that were the most common sign of a heavy rain or worst, a storm. It was as if a storm was going to form exactly with the settlement at the center. No one here had ever seen a phenomenon like this. At the tent city and all other residential areas, the people stayed in their houses and tents because of the confrontation between the military and the camp of the rebelling Senator Estrada. Now, however, not only those outside stood in place watching the sky, Those who were inside wondering why it suddenly turned dark went out only to stare at the sky with shocked faces. No one expected to witness something like this to happen. It made almost everyone stood in place outside their dwellings with heads facing the sky. It was a very peculiar sight as their brains failed to register the danger that they could have been facing if this was a natural disaster. Or maybe, they just did not know what they had to do. If this disaster really befell on this settlement, they had nowhere to go with the infected cities surrounding the settlement. Even if they escaped, the chances that they would survive outside for long was nil. They could only stare at the sky praying that the worst would not come. ***. General, the sky, I have eyes. You don't have to tell me. Captain Della Rosa and General Perez exchanged words as they also stared at the sky. Outside the industrial area, the focus of the soldiers was now at the sky instead of the ongoing battle inside. Sir Lopez, do you think it's the same as you reported in NAIA? General Perez turned to the older major. As the one leading the operation in NAIA, he witnessed the phenomenon there firsthand. Since the perpetrators back then and the people they were fighting now were obviously from the same group due to their clothes, and the former members of Senator Estrada's alliance confession also told the same. It would not be surprising that they would create another disturbance like this. Back then, before the outbreak, Ouroboros would surely not try to do anything like this in a large scale and in an obvious manner. Even though they had forces composed of strange beings, they would not be able to withstand it if the whole world suddenly besieged them. Now that the previous world had fallen apart, they were free to do what they wanted and in any scale they could. To the general's question, however, Major Lopez shook his head. It's different. Back in NAIA, the strange clouds came out of nowhere and spread from the center. The clouds above us are doing the exact opposite. While the two were talking, a report from the soldiers they sent to the eastern wall of the settlement to check about that beam of light came in. Unfortunately, the situation could not be confirmed immediately as the area where the beam came from was hidden by the overpass and trees, but the thing they confirmed was that the Baclaran church turned into ruins. There was also the appearance of a dragon-like creature which seemed to be fighting something on the ground, but it required further investigation. The dragon was already out of sight as they saw it land at the vicinity of the church. Hearing about the dragon-like creature made the officers that already heard about the news from the military settlement in Quezon think. General Faustino himself informed them through the radio that the person called Mark and his group would be coming riding a dragon-like creature. Although they were still in disbelief about it, the reports they received from the other settlement proved it otherwise. The dragon appearing near the settlement added the murders of the people that had conflict with Team Fairy, proved the thought General Perez had. If that creature appeared there without anyone even noticing, it meant that the person they had been waiting for was lurking around exacting revenge on his own. While in that though, a hurried voice came in from the radio. West Wall to HQ. We confirmed visuals of the dragon again. It's flying towards the settlement. Wait. There seemed to be someone riding on the dragon's back. We're waiting for instructions. Hearing that, the officers looked at each other and nodded. HQ to West Wall. Do not shoot and let them enter the settlement. I repeat, do not shoot. Although they were confused, the soldiers on the West Wall affirmed the order and just watched the dragon fly over them. Soon, the dragon was already in sight. The soldiers around the industrial area were already informed and were already in defensive stance if things had gone awry. Mark flew on Schaffler's back watching the soldiers below. Since they did not shoot, he expected that the military had already deduced that he was here. After all, they had been looking for him and his group already these past days. With the soldiers in the way, Mark needed to make them retreat first. As such, he made Schaffler land near the area where he could see familiar faces. As the dragon landed, the soldiers became more alerted. He was still wearing the robe he got from the enemies after all. Mark noticed it and removed the hood covering his head to make them sure that he was human. He also removed his mask which showed his face towards Major Lopez and Captain Della Rosa. Seeing the rather familiar face, both the major and the captain felt relieved. They stepped forwards with General Perez to welcome him, but before they could speak, You are General Perez, am I right? Mark spoke in a rather cold tone that made everyone feel that something is wrong. We can do the introductions and talk later. I want you to make your soldiers evacuate the industrial area. Mark then turned around and was about to make Chaflar fly once more, but Captain Della Rosa called out. Wait. Why do you want to make us retreat? Of course, everyone that heard Mark had that question in mind. Mark turned his head and replied. I have some business with those people in robes. All of them will have to die. If your soldiers got caught in it, don't blame me. With those words, Chaflar took flight once more. This time, Mark made the dragon circle the industrial area as if announcing his presence. In fact, he needed to wait till the soldiers retreated. That was when he was going to make a move. Asterisk asterisk. No wonder that guy and his companion left after taking away Flam. Dopp frowned as he watched the dragon flying at the sky. What are we going to do now? Devon asked. Emmett had already told them his encounter with the group, which left him severely wounded. That dragon was also there, and it was now obvious that the man that defeated Flam and those people were in the same group. It meant that that guy flying in the sky would be looking for the sylph they had just taken with great sacrifices. Start the ceremony early. That guy is not someone we can deal with. He took down Flam in seconds. That thing in the sky should also be his doing. We need his help. Hearing that, the robed figures waiting for orders in the room hurried out of the building. They went to the largest warehouse. There, 500 unconscious people were lined up in accordance to the symbols on the floor written in blood. Then, 5 people wearing white clothes stood at the center of the symbols, forming a circle. At their center, a pentagram was drawn. Raising their hands, the 5 figures started to pray. Tisk. We don't have much time. Dopp spoke. Prepare to retreat. The ritual will take some time, but I don't think that guy up there will wait too long. The soldiers are already retreating, so he might be waiting for them to finish. I don't know why, but we already finished one of our missions here. That guy for sure had done something against the Great One. I can feel it. Retreat. What retreat? What about our agreement? If you people offended that person outside because you took his companion, just return this insect back. Hearing the word retreat did not click well with Senator Estrada, and he immediately shouted furiously. He grabbed Dopp by his shoulders and started shaking him. Bam! Dopp just made a slight push and the senator was flung onto the opposite wall, causing the latter to vomit quite an amount of blood. He was just a normal person. That force that was used to him was enough to severely injure him. Are you an idiot? Dopp spoke. A pure elemental being cannot be compared to that agreement you are speaking of. Dopp then ignored the senator, who could not even talk back anymore. He started to prepare to leave with Devon, who was using his psychic barrier as a cage, putting Ophelia inside. Leaving? Don't bother. Even if you people return her, I won't leave you all alive. The chilling voice was heard inside the room, causing everyone to freeze. Dopp immediately retreated away from the source of the voice while Devon raised his hand to create a barrier in front of him. There, they saw a figure appear out of thin air. F***ck. It's that camouflage ability again. Dopp cursed. How are you here? Who's the one outside if you are here? What? You call another guy an idiot, but you're also an idiot that fell for a fake. Mark, who was not wearing his robe anymore, spoke with ridicule. The one riding Chaflar right now was only an empty robe made to stand using blood metal. Mark was already on the way to secure Ophelia first. He then turned his head towards Devon, who had Ophelia in his barrier. Give her back and I'll secure a painless death for you. F***cku. Devon replied and flung his hand. He created a barrier that moved forwards in attempt to push Mark back. To his horror, Mark raised his hand, releasing black smoke. When that smoke touched the barrier Devon made, the barrier slowly disintegrated. So, you want the hard way, is it? Poof! Mark vanished and turned into mist. The mist and smoke mixed inside the room, which made everyone try to dodge. It did not take long and the smoke vanished with Mark appearing once more. When they looked at him, however, They were surprised to see that he was already holding what he came here for. Dop turned to the cage Devon made with his ability and there was nothing inside anymore. Furthermore, Devon was on a strange position and was frozen without moving. Only his head was able to move, but it was obvious that he was in extreme pain. You peasants are all too weak. I overestimated you all. Ouroboros is just some shabby organization made for wimps. Mark said as he looked at everyone in ridicule. Sure enough, he could feel everyone here aside from Senator Estrada, who was barely conscious, and Devon, that could not move at all, felt infuriated. However, none of them spoke or went to attack in fury. I'll take my leave for now. Mark spoke once more. By the way, I will have you all give me an entertaining show. I wonder who will last the longest. He then vanished in the room, leaving a chilling smile in their minds. Dop inhaled in relief seeing their enemy leave, but he did not let his guard down. The pressure being emitted by Mark just now was terrifying for everyone here. We lost. Let's leave. Grrrg, Dop decided as he looked at Devon. Although Deval could still move his head, it seemed that his voice was also sealed. It was then that a chilling report came in. Sir Dop, Sir Dop. A shadow person came in, not from the shadows but running into the room through the door. A wall of we suspected to be miasma surrounded the whole industrial area. All of our people were severely weakened and could not use their abilities anymore. **T. Miasma? Who the **CK did we mess with? Dop cursed as he slammed his fist on the wall. No wonder that Devon's ability was useless and Flam was easily captured. Furthermore, if there was miasma surrounding the place, the shadow people would not be able to leave at all, and that was their only way of escape now. No, there is still a way. If it's that person, then. Dop remembered something and he ran off towards the warehouse where the ritual was ongoing, leaving Devon to his demise inside the room. Day 54 to 11:35 a.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. Miasma. Common people might not have known of it, but it was the thing that most spiritual beings, elementals and psychics feared of. A lot of beings even in Ouroboros feared such thing. It would not be wrong to say that it was the bane of Ouroboros. Who would have thought that a human that could control such baneful power? Even a human that casually touched such energy could lose his mentality, and those that were exposed to high concentrations of it would cause their bodies to rot painfully. How could someone like that exist? I did not agree to this mission to encounter such being. Dop murmured with all those thoughts in his mind. He was currently running as fast as he could. Since he was created, it was the first time he experienced a setback like this where he had to do all he could in order to survive. Fear? He did not know of it. Not until now. Devon had been done in the blink of an eye, and the sylph they captured was taken back without them being able to resist. It was questionable why their enemy left them alive, but it looked like he did not have any notion to let them go. My greed got the better of me, but why is that guy going against us in the first place? He questioned, but of course there was no answer. Dop finally arrived at the warehouse and took a peek. To his relief, the ritual was still ongoing. Screams of all the sacrifices echoed eerily, wailing in pain as their bodies started to dry up, as if all the fluids in their bodies were being sucked up. Sir. A robe person hurriedly approached Dop. How will the ritual take? It's already in the middle stages, sir. It will finish shortly. Good. Dop said, but his complexion did not improve at all. Continue the ritual without fail. I have to do something. Yes, sir. Dop then hurriedly left. He was now heading towards the aircraft parked near the warehouse. He was not trying to escape using it. It was pointless to try that. Instead, he was going to contact someone really quick. If it went well, there might be a chance to survive this. At the sky, Mark sat on Chaffler's back holding Aphelia carefully. The face and figure was totally different from the one in the memories he got from Freed, but her expression while sleeping was surely the same. Mark was glad that Aphelia was just unconscious and no further harm was inflicted to her. If she did have more things done to her, his switch might have flipped immediately. He caressed Aphelia's head with his finger, letting her sleep some more. This girl barely rests at all. It was her habit since she became Freed's personal maid. Mark looked at the sky. The clouds swirling above had already covered the whole industrial area inside and outside. He looked down. The several meters high wall of miasma surrounded the whole place, preventing all his enemies from escaping. Now, shall we begin the experiment? Show me how long can all of you last, I wonder. Mark smiled while his eyes were glowing eerily. That expression was surely something that would not show at someone who was looking at the creatures below as equal. Right now, all of them were just pests that needed to be exterminated, both for relief and for fun. Beside him, a sword was shaking fiercely. Not because of excitement but because of fear. Although Flam was just a sword, it could perfectly grasp its surroundings by detecting the energy around it. Right now, however, it could not feel anything but the overwhelming animosity that the person that captured it was emanating. Flam was sword that gained sentience due to blood that washed its blade for decades. Countless lives were taken away by its blade. The negative emotions from that blood caused its birth. Still, all the negative emotions that gave birth to it could not be compared to the negative emotions it could feel right now. Mark raised his right hand facing the sky. 3 crystals manifested in front of his palm and glowed brightly like stars in the cloudy sky. Crackle. Branching light traveled from cloud to cloud with a rumbling sound. It repeated several times, alarming everyone inside and outside the settlement. The display of lights in the cloudy sky was both fascinating and frightening. They all raised their heads to see the light show in the sky. Finally, the lightning was not content of traveling just from a cloud to another. Crackle. Bam. The first strike had finally fallen onto the ground. A single shadow person disintegrated, leaving his burned robe on the ground. This alarmed all those that were around that shadow person, but before they could flee, remaining electricity in the air scattered as if being guided into their bodies. As they felt their bodies paralyze, they could only look at the sky one last time. Along with the flashing lights from the sky falling onto them, their pitiful lives flashed by their eyes. Crackle. Bam. Bam. Lightning rained inside the industrial area. One by one, the enemies that could not use their abilities died. The pain they suffered might be short, but it should be the most painful thing they felt in their lives before they left this world. They said that lightning could only hit a person once in his life. It was a thing that could happen by chance. If the person survived, that would likely be the first and last time they could get hit by a lightning. Not this time, however. Those that managed to survive the first lightning strike on their bodies were hit a second time. Survive once more and another one would come falling. Even if they survived the third strike, the fourth would still come. There was no doubt that the only purpose of this rain of lightning was to eradicate them all. Like black ants disturbed from their lines, the enemies scattered, fleeing for their lives. As the attacks were lightning strikes, they thought of finding shelter. However, as if ridiculing their lives, the lightning bent and turned in unlikely angles before hitting the ground just to enter the places they hid. Without places to run, the lightning hit their bodies. There was no escape. That was what the lightning wanted to tell them. A smarter werewolf transformed. He managed to withstand the first and second strike with his strengthened body. As the third strike came, he knew that he would not be able to withstand it anymore. By chance, he grabbed a metal pole and threw it towards the lightning in an attempt to either block or redirect it away. However, it was naive thinking. The lightning bent away from the metal, avoiding it instead of getting attracted to it. Without touching the metal he threw, the third strike hit him, causing him to fall onto the ground, dead. How boring, they died too easily. Mark said, but his expression betrayed what he said. He was surely having fun watching his enemies die with fear as the last thoughts in their minds. However, it was not enough. They were not suffering enough at all. Soon, the lightning strike became thinner and thinner. At last, the lightning looked like it was just the size of a laser pointer. It was as if the lightning was finally losing its energy. However, that was not it. What they thought was nothing but a false hope. Since the lightning became weaker, the enemies did not die immediately. That was when several more lightning strikes hit their bodies in fixed intervals. They could do nothing but spasm on the ground until they finally died. They could not even scream as their voices were unable to come out. Dop looked at his surroundings in horror. None of the lightning strikes hit him at all, but that was the worst thing that could happen right now. As he was fine, he could watch all his subordinates die one by one. Some of them tried to call him for help, but of course, there was nothing he could do. His ability had no way to deal with this kind of thing. He looked at the sky. He knew that a gaze was fixed on him this whole time, a gaze full of ridicule and contempt. However, he was still not losing hope. The person he had just contacted agreed to help him. The price might be overly expensive, but as long as he was alive, he could gain it back. Crackle. Ting. Mark frowned. After his gaze left Dop, who ran into their aircraft to hide, he sent a small lighting towards the aircraft as a warning. To his surprise, it looked like that the aircraft had a barrier to block his lightning attacks. It was the same for the warehouse near the aircraft. None of his lightning attacks could enter the warehouse at all. He did not know whether those were energy barrier or a psychic ability. Still, he could not let those be. With a wave of his left hand, black smoke surged towards the barriers of the aircraft and the warehouse. Crash. A sound like glass breaking was heard as the surges of miasma made contact with the barriers. Since the miasma corroded the energy that made up the barriers could not be maintained anymore and were broken into pieces. Seeing the barriers broken, Mark sent several streaks of lightning into the warehouse, aiming at the enemies inside. Before the streaks of lightning could hit them, however, burst. The whole warehouse exploded into a sea of flames. With that explosion, the whole warehouse became nothing but burning debris. Mark was surprised. Is this what they used the hostages for? The sea of flames was rather strange. There was a kind of energy inside those flames was on par with his miasma, and both energies were countering each other. Flames burst and spread into a certain distance, forming a large circle of flames. Mark thought that they self-destructed, but the questions in his mind was immediately answered. A large figure emerged at the center of the circle. It was about 3 meters in height. The figure was humanoid with ram horns on its head. Its skin was black in color and looked totally scorched, with cracks releasing glow like magma. The figure's head was covered in flames, and nothing else aside from its glowing eyes could be seen from its face. On its right hand, it was dragging a 2-meter sword with a half-meter wide blade. Like the figure's head, the sword was also covered in flames. Finally, the figure spoke with a gruff and eerie kind of voice. "Congratulations, Master Garvlam." The remaining members of Ouroboros kneeled outside the circle of flames, calling upon the name of the demon they had just called. Dop was among them. Hearing the felicitations of the people that called him here, the demon nodded in satisfaction. His fiery eyes fell on Dop, who was known to lead this people to call him here. "Dop, I am gratified for your success in calling me here into the surface once more. However, what is with this event? Why are there traces of that foul false deity in this place?" Hearing that, Dop was dumbfounded. He had no idea why he was asked of that question. The missions Dop was given was to aid Devon take control of this settlement, investigate the events regarding the Great One, and to investigate what had happened to Death Valley settlement. As for the ritual, it was just an attempt to call forth one of their leading figures in the organization. The ritual might or might not succeed, and it was lucky that it had succeeded, as their survival was now ensured. However, for the demon to speak of a false deity here, Dop could not fathom how it came to this. Dop could not reply at all. However, something came into his mind as his wide eyes fell onto the figure flying in the sky. Day 56 to 12:01 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. A false deity. It was those who had the strength but were not recognized as a deity by the heavens. There were quite a number of false deities that emerged during the unrecorded times of history. The flame demon called Garvlam was one of them. He was a flame demon who emerged during the eruption of a volcano which killed millions of people at that time. The negative sentiments left from those who were killed by the eruption, especially those who were burned to death, created such demon. Being a brutal and arrogant demon, he made enemies of true deities, lesser gods, and earth gods. He killed people for fun, destroyed cities just on a whim, and played with lives of people. It did not sit well with those worshipped beings, of course. Forced to flee from the country he was born, he ended up somewhere in the Pacific. However, he was still almost caught by his pursuers. As he did not want to be killed, he did a gamble in the brink of his death. He jumped into a volcano and sealed himself. He lost his physical body at that time but managed to preserve his spirit. The seal managed to fulfill its purpose of blocking his pursuers, though he ended up being trapped himself. He managed to survive and recover his spirit. However, he never recovered his body and was never able to undo the seal he created himself. While he was sealed, something changed in the world. The external energy needed to undo the seal was never enough. Like other beings that were sealed and chose to seal themselves, he was forced to wait until now. During the period he was sealed, a connection unto him was found by a being that created an organization in the surface. Since that time, he became part of it. Now that the world changed once more, not only the energy in the air was abundant, but just 1,000 people could provide the energy to make him manifest in this place. He was born anew. Of course, his current state was still far weaker than the past, as the earth had just recovered from its previous state. But without those deities and gods from before, he could recover as much as he could from now on. Garvlam saw that Dop did not answer his question and just turned his head towards the sky. That was when the flame demon saw the creature that was not supposed to exist in this age anymore, a dragon. Not only that, but it was a tamed one, as there was someone riding on its back. Seeing the person atop the dragon, Garvlam could not help but feel surprised, which soon turned into interest. During the time he fled, he encountered another false deity. Those that worshipped that deity called him deity of bloodshed. He was a demon capable of controlling miasma. Despite both of them being the same kind of demons that were born from negative sentiments, the two hated each other. Not only that, the formless demon had a foul mouth and always spouted incomprehensible nonsense, the nature of the two contradicted each other. Fire was a source of energy, but miasma was a devourer of energy. Fire was hot and bright, but miasma was cold and dark. Miasma could devour the energy emitted by fire, but it could never eat fire itself. As such, the two contradicted each other. Unexpectedly, Garvlam found traces of that foul-mouthed demon on the supposed human atop the dragon's back. With a single thought, wings made of flames sprouted on his back, which flapped fiercely and sent him afloat. With his flapping wings, he stood in the air in front of the dragon while staring at the person on its back. The more he tried to read the person, however, the more shocked he had been. Mark did not speak and stared at the being flying in front of him. Hearing this demon's name and seeing his appearance invoked a memory he had from the deity of bloodshed. That formless demon and this flame demon had fought before and ended up in a stalemate. The battle was never finished, as the local deities intervened due to their battle causing too much destruction to the land. "Just what are you?" That was the first thing that Garvlam told Mark. "You're the fourth being that asked me that," Mark answered. He was calm and collected. There was no fear in his mind and heart, and instead, that memory invoked inside him made him want to finish that fight. The flame demon was surprised. It realized that Mark might have encountered other beings that were able to see the anomaly going inside him. More than that, he survived. An anomaly like this should never exist, and if other beings saw him, he would either be killed or be devoured. Yet, he was here. "Why do you have the smell of that foul false deity?" Garvlam asked the next question he wanted to know, as Mark seemed to have no intention answering the first one. "Why do you ask? I have things to settle with him. If you can tell me where that bastard is, I can leave you alive despite trying to kill my people." To that answer, Mark smiled mysteriously. "Sad to say, you won't be able to see that guy anymore." Mark looked straight at the demon's flaming head and tilted his head. "I already devoured that guy. You won't be able to finish your battle with him." Hearing that, Garvlam was surprised. Impossible. No, it should be impossible, but you. Before Garvlam finished his sentence, Mark stood up holding Flam in his right hand. Also, don't be mistaken. I'm not at your mercy. Whether you want it or not, those creatures you said as your people will die. It's because they harmed my people first. If you stand in the way, I'll devour you like that guy. Mark pointed Flam towards the face of Garvlam. Fascinating. Instead of getting angry, the demon was more interested. I can't let you just kill them. The others will ridicule me. But, I want to see how you are going to do that. Garvlam swung his large sword horizontally. The force and pressure from that casual swing could topple a small building. The slash missed, however. Mark had already jumped off from Chaffler's back, and he already commanded the dragon to leave with Aphelia using his mental connection with it. Bat wings flapped on Mark's back as he flew in fast speeds. He charged towards the flame demon with Flam in front of his face pointed at the enemy. Ping! A sound was heard across the settlement as Garvlam blocked the piercing attack with the flat side of his sword. However, that was not the end. Pang! Bam! Ping! Mark quickly pulled back his sword after his piercing attack was blocked and followed up with 3 quick slashes which the flame demon also blocked. Sparks scattered as the 2 strange swords were locked up with each other while Mark and Garvlam stared eye to eye. I'm surprised that you can use that cursed sword without being possessed. Is it the same way you dealt with that foul-mouthed bastard? You don't have the right to know. Bam! Mark kicked the flame demon on his stomach. He took advantage that flame demon was staring fixatedly on him to do a sneak attack. Of course, it did no damage at all aside from pushing the 3-meter-tall demon away. If they were not in the air, it was doubtful if the flame demon would budge from that kick at all. A sneak attack. Humans really love to do such sneaky tricks. Garvlam glared at Mark and charged forwards. Swoosh. The large sword was swung with a much stronger force. But then, Mark's figure vanished and turned into mist before the sword hit him. The slash missed air pressure from that slash continued forwards, causing a strong gale. As always, your attacks are too wide, Mark said as he appeared at Garvlam's right flank and slashed his own sword. Grass HH. The slash connected with the flame demon's body, causing the sword's waved blade to behave like a saw as it cut through the demon's body. Before Mark could finish the attack, however, he vanished once more as a counterattack came. Garvlam's elbow from the arm that he used to hold the large sword returned, trying to hit Mark's head. Garvlam clicked his tongue. You have the same style as that bastard, huh? Using speed to compete with me. Although that bastard don't have the ability to turn into mist in an instant without leaving the body he possessed. The demon spoke as he tapped the gash on his flank. There was blood, but it was not dripping out of the wound at all. The blood looked like lava glowing brightly. Then, the gaping wound closed and his body returned to normal like nothing happened. But that is not enough to kill me at all. Ha ha ha. The flame demon laughed. It seemed that he was enjoying this fight that he had not experienced for a very long time. However, while he was speaking, he noticed that his opponent vanished. Grrrrahhhhh. Screams were suddenly heard, making the flame demon look down to the ground. There, he saw his opponent killing the members of Ouroboros that started preparing to escape. Bastard! Garvlam shouted. He immediately charged down to prevent Mark from killing more. Swoosh! Bam! A strong earthquake was felt in the area as Garvlam tried to slash Mark but ended up hitting the ground instead. A feet-deep crater was created on the cement as he landed on the ground with his strong attack. Shirk! Swick! 2 long gashes appeared on the flame demon's back as Mark appeared behind him and slashed twice. Garvlam picked up his sword and waved it around along with his body towards his back. Mark hurriedly retreated and vanished, causing the attack to miss once more. However, the gust of wind created by his attack ended up blowing some of his subordinates away. Wow, you're harsh to your people, aren't you? Mark spoke with ridicule as he appeared on top of an electrical post. The flame demon did not answer anymore. Instead, did not even glare at Mark as he grabbed the concrete post Mark was standing on with his left hand and snapped it like a stick. Mark flew off laughing, which infuriated the flame demon even more. "Just like how I want it," he murmured as his eyes were already glowing red. Demons were arrogant and hot-headed beings. Now that this guy was being played with, he would surely blow up soon. To make that even faster, Mark stealthily started to use his emotion induction towards the flame demon. Of course, it was still far from enough to defeat the enemy. Besides, his primary goal was not to fight this guy but to kill those that messed with his group. This demon could escape but not those people. He would never let them get away. There, the chase between the two ensued. Mark started to fly around, disappearing and appearing here and there while harvesting the lives of the remaining enemies like crops during harvest season. The enemy's hope for survival after the ritual succeeded had been duped. Not only was that, but the tool for harvesting their lives was no other than one of their supposed leaders in this mission, Flam. Seeing what was happening, Dop became wide-eyed. According to the records, Garvlam was strong. However, they totally forgot one thing. The flame demon had just been resurrected. Although he was strong, he was still far from he used to be. If it was true that the enemy really devoured another false deity, then Garvlam would not be enough. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. While all those things were happening inside the industrial area, a hole opened out of nowhere, suspended in the air on top of a building outside the settlement. On that hole, 4 robed figures emerged before the hole closed. All of them then looked towards the industrial area surrounded by gray clouds above and a tall wall of miasma around it. "That should be the target area," one of the robed figures spoke, pointing forward. Day 54 to 12:04 p.m. Rooftop, Okada, Manila, New Seaside Drive, Parañaque, 1701 Metro Manila. On the rooftop of a casino resort and hotel complex located on the Entertainment City gaming strip just more or less half a kilometer away directly south of the industrial area, 4 figures emerged from a hole in space. The shortest figure, wearing a black cloak, spoke and pointed at the direction north of them. From the small voice the figure had, it was obvious that the figure was a girl on her teens. As she was the last figure to come out of the hole, it was more apparent that she was the one responsible for it. "Spera, why didn't you just transport us directly inside that? I don't think that your portal is this inconvenient." The tallest and buffest bodies figure spoke towards the short girl. He was wearing a red cloak and a long thin sword was strapped on his waist. "Shin, you shouldn't on our cute Spera, you will frighten her." One of the 2 remaining figures that both wore purple-colored cloaks spoke as she hugged Spera like a pet. Her voice was bright and mellow. Those that would hear it would not help but feel attracted to it. "Yoko, you should stop that. Even if the world suddenly exploded, Spera won't change her expression." The last one, who was also a female, spoke. Compared to Yoko, her voice was cold and serene. However, it gave the same attractiveness as the other had. "Yoko, Tsukiko, you two should take this seriously." Spera spoke with her monotonous voice before she turned to Shin and answered his question. "I want to open the portal inside that, but it will take too much burden on me. If I forced it, I will use too much energy that we won't be able to open another if we needed to return urgently." "Are you saying that something is preventing you from opening the portal inside?" Shin asked, with made Spera nod in reply. "All right, let's go. That Dop offered us a good deal just to retrieve him alone." Hearing the order of their leader, they started to make their way towards the target area, except a single person. "Spera, what are you doing? Are you scared?" Yoko asked as they noticed Spera not bulging from her initial spot. "You 3 go. I'll wait here." "Why?" To that question, Spera looked at the 2 females in her group. "As I thought, you 2 don't feel it." She then turned towards Shin. "You can feel it, right? You mean the feeling that I should go in there? As if something is attracting me to that place? It's somewhat nostalgic?" "That's right. I get the same feeling, it's rather unpleasant." The conversation of Shin and Spera made the other 2 confused. However, Shin would not let anyone left behind. He picked up the small-statured Spera by her waist. "What are you doing? We can't leave you here whether you like it or not. Aside from your portals, your physical ability is lacking. We also need you to escape if the need came. The energies in that place are rather overwhelming. I think that Dopp succeeded in the ritual after many others in the organization tried several times before. But someone with the same strength as that demon is fighting it." Spera really did not want to go, but with the difference between her strength and Shin's, she could only sigh as she was carried away. Leaving the rooftop, Shin, who carried Spera along with Yoko and Tsukiko, jumped down the uneven-shaped floors of the casino hotel and made it down onto the road without problems. Below the building, they encountered a lot of infected, as the casino hotel was one of the most infected areas near Bay City, but with their prowess, the infected did not even bother them as they ran towards Bay City. Day 54 to 12:05 p.m. South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque, Metro Manila. As the wall of miasma prevented the general and other soldiers from seeing what was happening inside the industrial area from the ground level, the general and the officers moved towards the roof of the closest casino hotel north of the industrial area. There, you could at least see the events inside to some degree with the help of binoculars and the scopes of their sniper rifles. They actually tried to fly a camera-mounted drone inside, but as the drone touched or flew above the black mist-like wall, the drone would immediately lose power and crash. Their soldiers had already retreated outside the area for the most part. However, they did not know if there were soldiers still alive buried under the debris of the collapsed buildings. As the retreat became urgent, they had no time to save them anymore. "Is he still human?" the general voiced, seeing Mark contend face to face with the 3-meter-tall monster. To their eyes, no matter how trained they were as soldiers, those swings the flame demon that appeared did was hard to see. All they could see were blurs, and the large sword already traveled to another point. Not only that, but they found it hard to catch up with how fast the flame demon and Mark was moving. No one could answer the general. All of them were focused on the fight between Mark and Garvlam. While they were watching, 3 guests suddenly appeared. "Miguel, something unusual is happening here, isn't it?" Hearing that voice, General Perez turned his head by reflex. "Isaac, what are you doing here? It's dangerous," the general blurted out, which snapped the other soldiers from the scene inside the industrial area. They all looked the guests that were being escorted by some soldiers serving as bodyguards. It was Professor Isaac Company together with his 2 assistants. The general glared at the bodyguards, making them have troubled expressions, but the professor spoke. "Don't blame them. I forced them to bring me here. Also, it's not me who wanted to come here but my children." Isaac nudged his chin towards Nia and Alan, his personal assistants and foster children. "Sorry, General, but we can't help it." Nia apologized. "Both I and Alan felt that we should go here. The feeling is too bad that if Professor did not allow us, we would have sneaked here." To her words, Alan nodded with seriousness. "What Nia said is true, General." "Can you two explain?" "Sorry, General, but it's hard to explain." Nia answered the general's inquiry, but her attention was already on the ongoing fight inside the industrial area. Alan was the same. Before the general could probe any further, a message came from his radio. "General, Miss Mei Xiao returned. She is at the eastern gates requesting for entry." "What are you doing?" the general bellowed on the radio. "Let her in. Why do you have to ask me?" From the information he had in Mark's appearance, he already deduced that the figure that fought the sword-wielding man before was Mei. The proof of it was the very same sniper rifle Mei used was with that figure. When the two left the area, Mei did not return, and instead Mark returned with a dragon. It was very likely that she was somewhere outside. "General, she's not alone. I don't know how, but the 2 girls in Team Fairy are with her. There was also a dragon with her, 2 strangers and a weird-looking creature." Hearing that, the general understood. The guards left at other positions had no idea what was happening here. "Don't bother. Just let them in. Ask them where they want to go, and if they said that they wanted to go in the operations area, escort them with all hospitality." "Yes, sir." The communication ended with the general's sigh. At least, it was confirmed that Mei Xiao was safe. Beside the general, Major Lopez was also relieved, although he was still feeling guilty about being powerless at that time to protect his people. Before the general could take a breather, "General, look there!" Captain Della Rosa shouted with shock while looking through his binoculars. The entrance of the industrial area was still surrounded by soldiers despite the wall of miasma being present. It was to stop anyone from entering and exiting the operation area. When the general and other soldiers looked at the same direction using their binoculars, they saw 4 robed figures walking towards the entrance. There were soldiers around the 4, but instead of intercepting the 4, all the soldiers were just standing without moving. They were all blankly staring in front like mannequins. "General, should we shoot?" one of the snipers inquired. However, the general shook his head. "Don't agitate them. They might have employed some hypnotic power to pass through without fighting. With ability like that, they could have caused more harm, but they didn't. Just let them pass." It was a rational decision. Strong beings were coming one after another. The humans should stay at the side for now. They watched the 4 walk towards the entrance. The one walking in front pulled out his sword and slashed towards the wall of miasma, making a gap between the walls. The 4 then hurried inside before the wall returned to what it looked like before. Fortunately, when the 4 entered, the soldiers outside snapped back to reality and moved. It made everyone watching felt relieved, especially the general, who made the right gamble. He then felt a pat on his shoulder. "It's not easy calling the shots, isn't it?" Professor Isaac spoke, sympathizing with the general. Soon, as the general expected, Mei and her entourage came to this very location. Amy's appearance caused some disturbance, but it was not that bad as she was with the renowned fairy sniper. Many of them also recognized Colleen, who was an actress before the apocalypse. There was not much words exchanged afterwards. They all just watched the events happening inside the industrial area. No one noticed, however. Iola was glaring at Nia and Alan stealthily. Day 54 to 12:10 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Flames raged inside the industrial area as sounds of swords clashing and destruction echoed within. Only a few was left among the members of Ouroboros, and not because they were had to kill, but Mark purposely left them behind. Among them were Dop and Emmett, who had both of their legs crippled. Their muffled, painful cries were apparent, but as they were still holding onto hope of surviving, they held it in. Garvlam was enraged to a frightening degree now. "You're not taking me seriously, aren't you?" The flame demon spoke in a grave tone. All this time, Mark was only evading his attacks and aimed at the people he was protecting. He could already hear the mocking voices of the other beings at the top of Ouroboros in his ears. To his enraged question, however, "Took you long enough?" Mark smiled with ridicule. "You're strong. I admit it. But it seems that you never improved after thousands of years. You still fight the same way as you fought the deity of bloodshed, or should I say, you got weaker." "You." Garvlam pointed his large finger towards Mark, shaking in anger. "You're forcing me." His eyes glowed like magma. Finally, Mark felt some pressure. The air was shaking fiercely as Garvlam released energy straight from his spirit. "Arise!" the flame demon shouted. Flames circled around the demon before a tower of flames burst into the skies, piercing through the clouds Mark gathered. The temperature around the area started to rise, which forced Mark to cover himself with miasma. Balls of flames then flew from the tower, falling onto every dead body present in the area. There, their bodies burned, leaving their charred skeletons behind. That, however, was not the end of it. The skulls of the skeletons burst into flames and were raised from the ground, leaving the rest of their bodies. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of flaming skulls littered the industrial area. Kekekekeke. Eerie rattling laughs could be heard that even the 4 intruders could not help but feel unsettled. Still, Shin and Spera felt the tugging feeling inside them way stronger than before. Day 54 to 12:12 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque, Metro Manila. A tower of flames lit up the already darkened surroundings under the thick dark clouds and enclosed by the black wall of miasma. Around the tower, floating flames decorated the sky like lanterns. It was not a festival though, but a fight of beings that already transcended the current level of humanity. Kekekekeke. The eerie laughter of the floating flaming skulls echoed all over the place with their ghostly voices and rattling jawbones. It was an amazing but totally horrifying sight to behold. In the surroundings, flames scattered across the industrial area as the heat from the pillar started to light up anything flammable near it. Buildings both finished and unfinished were already demolished and turned into unrecognizable debris as the walls and floors cracked under the extreme heat. The remaining parts of the tower crane that lost its jib earlier started to incline as its metal supports started to melt. Creak. Bam. Finally, the tower crane fell. Due to its height and position, some parts on top of it fell outside the wall of miasma connecting the inside and outside of the industrial area. Quite a distance from the tower, a black sphere of miasma could be seen floating. Inside was Mark, who flapped his wings while he covered his body with miasma to protect him from the heat. From the black sphere, only his eyes could be seen at a small gap in front of his face. He was staring at the towering flames with a calm expression. From the start, Mark was aiming for the guy to blow up his temper. Inside the memories Mark had regarding the flame demon, he knew that he was extremely arrogant and had a short fuse. It was already amazing that Garvlam lasted this long in holding his temper. That improvement might have been due to being sealed for a long time. However, the realization that Mark had been toying with him since the start pulled out the stopper. Mark could feel the enemy inside that tower of flames growing stronger. In exchange, however, his spirit was getting weaker. The flame demon had just gained his body, causing it to be weaker than before. To empower it in the short time he had just revived, he needed to take the energy straight from his source, his spirit that had been sealed for who knows how long. The enemy was growing stronger. However, there was one thing that did not cross the flame demon's mind. The heat in the surroundings started to cool down and the light the tower of flames was giving started to dim. However, it was not because the flame demon was already done. Only those outside the walls could notice that the walls of miasma were getting thicker and thicker. The heat in the surroundings was caused by a paranormal source. It carried energy emitted by the supernatural powers of the flame demon. That was a perfect food for the miasma Mark was controlling. While Garvlam was empowering himself, Mark was doing the same. The difference was that the latter was using the former's energy instead from his own source. Soon, the tower of flames was extinguished by its own, revealing the flame demon that was a meter taller and was with a body made from boiling lava. Rather than a demon, Garvlam not looked more like a gigantic lava golem. Not only his body but his sword also grew in proportion to his size. Comparing the size of the two, Mark was like a dwarf now. The giant turned his head towards Mark. At the same time, all the floating skulls did the same. "You better prepare yourself," the giant mocked. Mark did not reply as he removed the miasma covering his body. It was then that his figure appeared, causing the witnesses to be taken aback. His hair had grown longer up to the back of his knee. The bat wings on his back were covered in a thick black smoke, making the wings larger than before. His eyes glowed violet while black lines and markings could be seen on the parts of his skin that could be seen outside. "You." The flame demon was taken aback. "What, me?" Mark tilted his head. "You transformed, why can't I?" "Graaaa." The flame demon roared as it realized that Mark was still not taking him seriously. He swung his very large sword from above. His movement was fast and the slash came in almost instantly. The speed the demon displayed totally betrayed his current size. Boom! A large explosion-like sound could be heard as debris and dust scattered after the slash connected with the ground. That attack, despite coming from a sword, was like a hammer that was capable of shaking a whole city. Unfortunately, it did not hit its target. The attack was fast, but Mark had already seen the attack coming even before the actual attack was made. With a poof, he turned into black mist and flew around the demon in a half circle. "You should tone it down." The place is getting totally wrecked because of you. Mark spoke as he appeared just at an arm's reach to the right of Garvlam. The demon did not speak as it just punched Mark, who immediately retreated. However, that was not the end of the attack. At the same time, the very fast punch was unleashed. The floating skulls flew towards Mark's direction, trying to ram him down. Mark was immediately surrounded and used his shadow mist movement to escape. He appeared quite a distance away, but his clothes and skin had scorched marks all over. Tisk. I can't just rely on my movement ability anymore. That guy is really going all out. He realized. Each of the skulls was infused with energy that could burn a gap in his subspace during movement. Since he passed by several of them, it could not be helped his body was hit. While Mark patted his clothes and his burns started to heal, the next attack came. It was not from the flame demon but from the hundreds of floating skulls in the surroundings. Each skull opened their mouths wide and swoom. Balls of fire were launched towards Mark's direction. Mark frowned. It would be easy if these balls of fire could be dodged using his shadow mist movement. But all of them contained the same energy from the skulls. Without any choice, Mark started to maneuver around the hundreds of balls of fire launched towards him. However, that was not the end. The hundreds in numbers soon became thousands as the flaming skulls continued to launch balls of flame in succession. Seeing Mark having difficulty in dodging the balls of fire, Garvlam became delighted. He charged forwards, attacking Mark with another slash of his huge sword. Some of the balls of flame hit the demon's large, but it really did not matter to it as it continued to attack Mark. Bam! Boom! Bam! Further destruction ensued as Mark concentrated on dodging the sword more than the balls of fire. It could not be helped that Mark was hit several times by the balls. Compared to the damage that the slash of the demon could do, the balls of fire were nothing if he started to block the attacks with miasma. Such nuisance. Mark murmured as he started slashing the skulls that was close to him. Unfortunately, he was dismayed. Instead of being slashed into half, the flaming skulls hit by the cursed sword in his hand bounced off instead. Each of the skulls was as hard as Flam as it seemed. "Hey Flam, are you getting dull or something?" Mark asked in annoyance. Those skulls he had just attacked already came back and launched fireballs once more. In response, Flam shook very hard. Mark could tell that it was annoyed by his question. However, it was true that it was unable to cut through those skulls. This was a problem. There was no issue with the sharpness of the sword, but the issue was on the skull's hardness. However, Mark was annoyed but not troubled at all. He could still dodge and block majority of the attacks. Not only was that, but his true goal was still not being noticed by the opponent. Asterisk asterisk. That guy isn't human at all. Yoko voiced out as the four of them watched the fight between Mark and Garvlam. The four had already entered the place a while ago but just had not made a move in the open. Their primary goal was to secure Dop, who hired them for rescue, and not to fight openly. In the worst case, they would need to assist the flame demon, but they still needed to find their rescue target first. That person is strong, but it looks like Garvlam is already overwhelming him. Tsukiko voiced out, seeing that Mark was struggling as he tried to dodge and block as many of the attacks as he could. Both Yoko and Spera thought the same, but it seemed that Shin had another view of the battle. "You three shouldn't be blinded by what you can see in the surface," he said with a serious expression, making the three look at him. "My ability had to do with energies, so I'm sensitive to it. You three can't tell, but while the fight is being prolonged, Garvlam is getting weaker but his opponent is growing stronger." "Are you sure?" Tsukiko asked, making Shin nod. "But how?" Yoko asked as she turned her gaze back to the ongoing battle. "Have you two forgotten the main characteristic of miasma?" Hearing that, the two finally realized. "That's bad." Spera voiced out. "Yes. It's bad. Before we can take Dop away, we'll surely get dragged in their battle." Shin said. "What's your suggestion?" Yoko asked as the serious atmosphere ensued in the group. Shin thought of it for a bit and finally decided. "Spera, you go and find Dop. Me, Yoko and Tsukiko will assist Garvlam. It's not really our goal here, but if we succeeded, we can take more credit. If emergency arose, we will release the emergency signal, so Spera, hurry to pick us up at that time whether you found Dop or not. Hearing the orders of their leader, the three females nodded. With Spera splitting from the group, the other three headed towards the area of the battle. Still, Spera could not help but look at the current opponent of the Flame Demon as she ran. After all, the unsettling and nostalgic feeling she had was targeted towards that individual. For sure, Shin was feeling the same. Mark still continued to dodge and block the incoming attacks. It was rather going smoothly. Garvlam still had not noticed, but the energy he was releasing was decreasing in an abnormal speed. It was also still unnoticeable, but the speed that the skulls flew and attacked was decreasing. Even the glow on Garvlam's body was slowly dimming, but the Flame Demon was too enraged to notice all the changes happening. On contrary, Mark's flying speed was getting faster and faster. He even started to have the urge to parry the huge sword that the Flame Demon was swinging, but the number of balls of flame being shot around him was still within thousands. A short pause in his movement could turn him into barbecue. The fist-sized balls of fire that missed and landed on the ground caused small explosions about the size of a basketball. It might be small, but with hundreds of them landing on the wall of some of the remaining buildings, the structures started to crumble. Aside from that, the merciless attacks of the Flame Demon caused craters and more destruction everywhere the huge sword landed. In the middle of battle, Nana, la, la, la. A song was heard with two beautiful voices echoing in the area. Mark froze in the air. Bam, bam, bam. That sudden pause in his movement caused several balls of fire hit his body and caused him to plummet to the ground. Day 54 to 12:20 p.m., Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. Two voices, one song. The battlefield that was enveloped in destruction and killing intent was suddenly filled with the echoing harmonious melody. It was a beautiful song that could calm rage and fulfill discontent. The voices behind the song were of the opposite nature. One was lively and mellow while the other was cold and strong. Nevertheless, the two opposing voices alternating the lyrics of the song created strange but attractive harmony that anyone that would hear the song would not help but listen. Unfortunately, behind the beautiful song, the intent was different. There was no problem with the song. It was because of the voices. Those that would hear the voices, especially men, would enter a hypnotized state. Being unaware of the surroundings and unaware of themselves, those that entered that state could only follow the intent of the two women singing the song. Shin nodded at Yoko and Tsukiko, who stood atop the building quite a distance from the area the two inhuman beings were fighting. It was his idea, as he could feel an invisible field that was sucking a certain kind of energy around Garvlam's opponent. As he could not fathom what it was, he made the two girls sing the song away from the scope of that field. While the two women continued to sing, Shin finally moved forward. It was towards Garvlam, who was confused as to what was happening. Due to the Flame Demon's confusion, all the floating skulls stopped in the air in vigilance, ignoring their target that was directly hit by a number of balls of fire and already plummeted to the ground. Master Garvlam, with inhuman speed, Shin traversed the battlefield, jumped over the debris and dodged the walls of flames scattered on the ground. It did not even take a minute and he already called out to the Flame Demon. Who? Garvlam's massive body turned around and saw the red-robed Shin kneeling on one knee and removed his hood as a sign of respect. Fret not, Master of Volcanic Flames. I and my comrades are here to assist. This one's name is called Shin. Shin spoke in a rather different way than normal. Who sent you here? The Flame Demon asked. Dop contacted us as an assurance and a way of escape. We are here to bring the remaining survivors away if there was any. Your Archiz is also included. Bring me back? Or trying to belittle me? A false deity? I won't leave this place until I kill that bastard? I dare not, Master of Volcanic Flames. However, your Archiz seem to have not noticed, but something is affecting your mind and heightening your rage. Your Archis did not even notice that your Arca's strength is waning rather severely. Hearing that, Garvlam inspected himself for the first time since he used the energy straight from his spirit. Now, he noticed that his body was weakening and the energy he had left already less than half of what he had released earlier. He looked at the floating flaming skulls around him and saw that their movements were way slower than they should have been. This made him shocked. Garvlam finally realized that he had fallen into something deep without him knowing. If the battle continued further without these people interfering, he would surely lose, not because the enemy overpowered him but because he empowered his enemy. The flame demon could not help but grit his teeth as the thought of how he was played by his enemy came into his mind. Where is that bastard now? I saw him fall if I remember correctly. Damn it, my memory is unclear. He asked with a curse as he looked around. He is in that area, I presume. Shin pointed at the northeastern direction about 100 meters away or so. An area filled with flames and debris from the collapsed buildings. I am worried, but it seemed that the ability of my companions worked. Your opponent might be unconscious now. Is it this song? I see, it's the hypnotism of sirens. Your Archis is right. However, my companions were not pure ones but were just descendants. Good. After this, I will reward you and your companions. First, I should kill that bastard before anything else. On your lead, your Archis. ***** on the other side of the battlefield. Mark laid down with his back on the hot ground in the middle of the debris. The cloak he wore was not burned and filled with holes. Even his clothes were burned to a certain degree. Aside from the clothes he wore, his long hair that was scattered on the ground was burned here and there. His skin had patches of third-degree burns. Several fingers on his left hand had turned into charcoal, leaving a bit of flesh remaining around his finger bones. The fall he had also snapped his wings that had the membranes of his wings also burned. The bones on his back also cracked a little. Nevertheless, he was still alive and his body already started on healing itself automatically. If not for the armor he was wearing and the slight resistance the robe he wore had, his body might look worse than what it looked like now. Luckily, his right hand still held Flam tightly. It caused the flames on the ground to scatter in order to not burn its new master. The worst thing right now, however, Mark was not moving and was staring blankly towards the sky. His eyes were lifeless. He was surely under the spell the voices carried. Outside, there was no activity, but inside, he was already blaming himself. Darn, I'm too careless. Well, good job warding off some of the flames. Mark complained at himself while commending Flam beside him. Right now, he was inside his subconscious world. As the hypnotism caused by the song invaded the will on his conscious, which was similar to possession, Mark was thrown into this world once more and was unable to come out. Fortunately, the song was unable to fully control his body, but his body ended up being an empty shell as long as he was affected by the song. I didn't expect some reinforcements that can pass through the wall of miasma I created to isolate the whole area. I wasn't able to detect them either, but it seems one of them already met up with that muscle brain demon. Master, what are you going to do now? Flam asked. You are calling me master willingly now, huh? Mark smirked. You were too reluctant when I took you earlier. You already showed your prowess to me. I'm not really getting a loss if I chose to follow you. That organization is too stuffy anyway. Wait, that's not it. Why are you still so calm? You're just a free kill as you lay down outside. Well, it's not like I don't have a card to play in this condition. Mark put his hands on the back of his head and sat down after creating an inclined chair behind him. Then, a large monitor appeared in front of him showing what his eyes could see outside. Master, what do you? Flam was surprised at this and was about to ask, but Mark did not let him finish his question as a smaller chair appeared beside him. Sit here and relax. Seeing his new master's calm demeanor, Flam timidly sat down on the chair facing the monitor. It was then that Mark spoke. Flam, tell me, what do you think mutators are? Hearing the strange question, Flam looked at Mark in confusion. Still, he gave the answer he knew that came from both the organization and the reports of the scientists he heard about. People who managed to adapt to the strain of mutagen in their bodies and gained superhuman abilities that was impossible to have before through genetic mutation. Mark nodded at Flam's answer and spoke. That is true at one part but also false in another. What do you mean? Think about it. Isn't mutators just infected that retained their human consciousness? Flam opened his mouth at the sudden contradiction, but before he could speak a word, he realized that he had nothing to retort it. Then, Mark continued to speak. Both the infected, whether mutated or not, had superhuman abilities and they know how to use them effectively. They can even use their psychic abilities if they have one. It was the same for mutators whether they are failed ones or successful ones. The moment they woke up, they had knowledge of their abilities without needing to fully discover it. Another thing is that whether it was a mutator or an infected, there are those that retained their humanoid bodies and there are those that barely looked like human at all. There is only one difference between the infected and mutators. That is the latter had consciousness and will while the former did not. Mark and Flam looked at the monitor. They could see the floating skulls starting to surround his body from the sky. Master, Flam was worried but Mark was still unfazed. He continued speaking. Do you know what happens when a mutator dies with his head intact? They immediately turn into mutated infected. But Master, it's really not the time. Mark still ignored Flam. They turned into mutated infected because they lost their consciousness after dying. Mark then smiled mysteriously. What will happen if shut off my connection outside leaving the empty body? I won't die since I have this world and I can reconnect my consciousness anytime, but don't you want to see what will happen? Master, you. Flam's childish large eyes became even wider as he looked at Mark. Well, you see. People under hypnosis had their consciousness asleep but the connection is still there. That is why what I will do now will never likely to happen to others. Watch. Mark turned at the monitor. Let's give it a keyword or something. I think this will be fine. Mark nodded and muttered with a snap of his finger. Release. He muttered and the scene at the monitor shook fiercely. Asterisk asterisk. My skull puppets already found him. Garvlum smirked. That bastard is really out cold. Yes, it should be like that until my companions removes the hypnosis. Those that were affected will remain at that state even if they stopped singing. It is strange however, but it seems like my companions cannot control his body. Just making that bastard unable to move is already enough. Remember that he is able to fight squarely with me. Even if I'm just resurrected, my strength is still comparable to lesser deities. Garvlum was already satisfied that it was his win even if he needed the assistance of these people from the organization. He only wanted to win and kill the bastard to end a several thousand-year battle. They were just a few dozen meters away and they could already see the enemy's body when, slowly, unsteadily and sluggishly, the haggard figure of the enemy stood up. Seeing that, Shin pressed a device into his ear. Yoko. Tsukiko. Did any of you cancel the hypnosis? The one of the voices singing in the background halted as a cold voice replied on the device. We didn't. You can hear us singing, right? Have you gone deaf? But the target is moving now. What? Impossible. It's true. Wait. There's something wrong. I'll contact later. Check Spera if she already found Dop, then continue singing. Okay. Shin stared gravely at the figure in front of them and readied his sword. On the other hand, Garvlum was looking at the enemy with a strange expression. Is that bastard dead? I don't sense any will on him. Your arc is. You don't mean, grr. The two then heard a very low growl from the enemy who was now staring at the two with his eyes that had two different glows. The right eye was red while the other was violet. Whom. Miasma burst onto the surroundings like water from a dam that had its gates broken. An overwhelming pressure swallowed the two that even the master of volcanic flames, the flame demon, Garvlum, felt the air grew heavy.